12,000 years ago, there were no farms on Earth. Today, farmland takes up more than half of the world's arable land, which equals a combined landmass larger than South America. But with expected increases in the global population, traditional farming is running out of space. And for as much good as modern agriculture has provided humanity, it's begun to take its toll on our planet. With 15 billion trees cut down each year, critical ecosystems are pushed aside to make more room for farming. When it comes to water, agricultural irrigation systems consume 75% of our fresh water supply, while chemical runoff seeps into our rivers and estuaries. Monocropping depletes our soil of its nutrients, forcing farmers to use increasing quantities of chemical fertilizers. And by the time the typical meal lands on your dinner table, its ingredients have traveled an average of 1,500 miles. That's why a new generation of farmers are turning farming on its head. They believe that instead of growing out, there are a lot of very urgent, very practical reasons to start growing up.
I love food. I like eating and I like making food, and I also love science and technology. For me, all of those things came together in vertical farming.
Skylar Pearson and her partner Hugh Neri are building Next Garden, an ag tech startup in Portland, Oregon. Their company is part of a global movement towards indoor controlled environment agriculture, often referred to as vertical farming.
During my graduate studies, I learned about vertical farming. It's amazing technology that can save so much of Earth's resources. At its very best, vertical farming is going to be a large-scale food source that feeds hundreds of millions of people. But at the very least, vertical farming is a fail-safe against the effects of climate change. Climate change is inevitably going to cause more droughts throughout the world. It's going to cause more catastrophic weather events like hurricanes and floods. It's going to cause a lot more insect and pest infestations. And those are all things that outdoor conventional farms don't have protection from.
At Next Garden, Skylar and Hugh are working to design more efficient systems that can be used in vertical farms anywhere in the world. They envision a near future where vertical farms play a major role in food production.
Food is something that everyone needs. It's the next on the list after water. Any way that we can make that a more accessible commodity is hugely beneficial to the earth in an environmental sense, but also to humans in a sense of sustenance.
I think realistically, vertical farming holds the potential as an industry to completely affect our planet.
So what exactly is vertical farming? The idea itself is pretty simple. Move food production indoors and stack crops on top of each other vertically. That way you're able to produce a lot more food using less space. Some vertical farms yield as much as 10 times the amount of crops in the same amount of space as a conventional farm. But the benefits go deeper than simply space. Because they're indoors, the environment is controlled. There are no seasons, so crops can be grown any time of the year in any part of the world, regardless of changes in weather or soil conditions. Use of pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers aren't necessary. And then there's water. Most vertical farms don't use soil, instead opting for hydroponic and aeroponic systems. High-pressure aeroponics, like the ones being used at Next Garden, they use 99% less water than conventional farming.
So that's where we find ourselves today. We're standing on the edge of the next evolutionary jump in humanity's quest for a reliable, sustainable food supply.
Dixon Despommier wrote what's seen as the defining text on this subject, The Vertical Farm, Feeding the World in the 21st Century. But he doesn't take sole ownership of the idea. It was a collaboration that began in 1999 with his students at Columbia University, who were eager to explore new ways of sustaining urban communities.
What if the food for cities came from cities? When this idea first occurred to at least our class, the students were actually the brains of the operation, and they were the ones that wanted to raise food on rooftops. All right, that was their original idea. But it was only enough to raise enough food for 2% of Manhattan, which disappointed them because they really wanted to feed everybody in Manhattan. And that's when I turned to them and said, well, then why don't we just take the rooftop idea and move it inside? I had no idea what I was talking about. I'm a microbiologist by training. I had no interest whatsoever in controlled environment agriculture at that moment, but I did want them to walk away from this course believing that they made a contribution to the future. So I let the class take this idea to the next step. Okay, if you have an indoor farm, what does it look like? How big is it? How many people can you feed? What kind of crops do you grow? Where's it located? All these questions have to be answered, right? So we worked for 10 years on that idea. I had 10 years worth of graduate students, and it worked. It actually worked. And so in 2010, I wrote a book on the subject based on the classes called The Vertical Farm. The book doesn't have any pictures of vertical farms because there were none. Right? Today, if you ask me how many vertical farms there are, I don't have a clue. The evolution of vertical farming has been so rapid, I think that it has a life of its own.
In the ensuing years, hundreds of vertical farms have launched in all corners of the earth, each pushing the field forward in new directions as they adapt the basic concept to solve new problems. One such example of this evolution is housed in the basement of a commercial building, only a few miles from where vertical farming was first conceived.
Farm 1 is a vertical hydroponic farm here in the heart of Tribeca. We grow microgreens, rare herbs, and edible flowers for the top chefs and restaurants in New York City. We have 1,200 square feet of growing space. A lot of systems are growing 3 or 4 plants, but here in this space we have over 60 different varieties, and we're growing over 300 batches of microgreens right now. Having your customers close to where you're growing is considered hyper-local. A lot of the produce that you go to a convenience store says like grown in Mexico, grown in California. So when you're picking produce and you need it to last till it gets to New York City, you're not picking at the peak of freshness. Typically, you're picking this product and then expecting it to ripen as it travels to its destination, which means that it lasts longer but it doesn't taste as good. Here at Farm 1 at 7 in the morning, our team comes in and we begin our daily harvest that we then deliver out at noon. And then at dinner time, that product that we harvested that morning is on your plate. So you're getting the freshest possible product, the most nutritious, a very flavorful product, and the chefs love that. We always want the farming community to grow, and we want economic avenues for people who are interested in farming. I have a lot of friends who are interested in agriculture, but the reason they didn't choose this avenue is because they didn't see a possible way to make a living from it. So if there are opportunities for people to come into these spaces, to work in them, then we're going to see a sprout of like new age farming, which is really exciting.
While Farm 1's clientele might be a select few, across the globe, vertical farming is being applied to a range of problems at a significant scale. In Singapore, the government hopes vertical farming will help feed their entire nation.
Singapore faces constraints in space and also in resources. Less than 1% of our land is for agriculture production. We actually import more than 90% of our food from overseas sources.
One of the world's most densely populated countries, there simply isn't space in Singapore for farmland. So a governmental organization, the Singapore Food Agency, has partnered with local farmers and engineers to find new ways to grow food domestically. They aim to triple domestic food production by the year 2030.
Sky Greens is one of the first commercially viable vertical farms in the world. There are 32 of these planters, which revolves around an A-frame, 9 meters high, and it is driven by a hydraulic wheel. The produce from this farm on 1 hectare of the land here is equivalent to 10 hectares of a normal farm. So we produce 10 times more per unit area of land. We make sure that nothing is wasted. We only use 5% of the water normal farms would use. And all our water is rain harvest. You can actually farm on any empty space within the city with this system. I think in Singapore, as in other parts of the world, farmers are getting old. We try to attract the young people with technology, because if you don't, then there will be no more people working on the farms. In the whole world, the cities are getting larger. So there will be mega cities all over the world, and they will need vertical systems.
We find quite important in our farmers the entrepreneurial spirit and the willingness to adopt technology, to try new things, and to look at different ways of farming. With all this mindset, it will actually transform our farming landscape.
But vertical farming is not without its critics, many of whom focus on the current limitations in terms of what can be grown, as well as the energy costs required to keep these farms up and running. While some linger on these drawbacks, others see the possibility of a future where vertical farms are incorporated into everyday life, where resources can be reduced, and where land previously used for farming can be reforested.
Every invention starts out crude and ends up sophisticated. Right now, it's mostly leafy greens, and it's mostly boutiques, and it's mostly expensive, but nobody wants that. That's just part of the evolution of the idea. The virtue of an indoor farm, however, is that you can manipulate the system, just like you would an engineering problem for improving the speed of a computer, for instance. What if vertical farming evolves into a complete agricultural activity? What if we can grow anything we want indoors? And what if it's cheaper to do it that way than it is to do it outdoors? There's no reason to suspect that if you really want that to happen, it will happen, because that's the way humans work.
Can you give it a quarter cup of water to that tray?
For the past couple of years, we've been developing and reiterating on our next farm design. The place that we're standing right now is going to be the site of a very scaled down replica of what one of our larger farms would look like. They contain a series of modular units. They're each about 8 feet tall and contain 3 levels of plant growth. And that allows us to create 3 distinct climatic zones of different temperature and humidity, and allows us to grow a number of different types of plants all in the same space.
So what we're doing is trying to accommodate for radishes, for carrots. We're working on things like potatoes. We're really trying to grow stuff that has higher biomass, stuff that's got actual density, because you really can't feed the world off of lettuce.
Overall, we're trying to achieve one farm covers an approximate 1 mile radius around it, and at a fraction of the price that a normal vertical farm would be able to output.
There's not any value in being pessimistic. There's not any value in being fearful of the future. I'm not foolish to think that everything's gonna be fine, we'll be great. We'll be good if we do something about it, and realistically, the stuff that we're working on, I don't know if the long-term impacts will come during our lifetime, but that's the point, is we're trying to build something, we're trying to grow an industry to give it a base to stand on for the years after we're gone.